Welcome everyone, I'm Maury Weinstein, President and Co-Founder of System Source, and welcoming today to 12 cybersecurity myths putting organizations at risk. It's a new presentation, and I hope you enjoy it and get something out of it. Questions are always good in the question box, and I do have the notes that you inserted in the question box while you registered. So let's get into the presentation. I have listed, let me turn my highlighter on. Maybe we'll go for Raven's Purple today. And I have included my home phone number, the office phone number in front of you. You're welcome to reach me anytime. If you dial 1 after hours, it does reach my cell phone. In case you are hearing something that I should hear, or maybe your IT operations is going backwards for the moment and you want to talk about it, I've left that number on the screen for that purpose. We hope you're enjoying your pizza. If you haven't received your pizza, please check your front door or reception desk. Sometimes that's the same place. And then contact Julie at jdellinger@syssource.com. Thanks, Julie, for putting together today's event. During the webinar, we'll be in presentation mode, and don't hesitate to view the webinar in full screen mode. There'll be some graphics and so on that might be useful if you have full screen. And a reminder to submit questions or in the chat box or the question box anytime, including telling us how what you'd like to learn today. We'll go to commercial for about 20 seconds, and then we'll get right in the meat of the presentation. Clients approach us usually to improve their IT or audiovisual maturity, generally operational maturity. We use the Learning Center to help do that. We do train about 600 people a month in a variety of topics, and AI is one of those topics that's leading at the moment. Those courses are either on-site or virtual or custom courses, which could be either one. Presentation systems is where we keep the team of folks doing the team's rooms, all the auditorium, all the digital signage work. There's about a dozen people involved in that effort. Consulting is where we keep our heavy hitters. These folks do our security assessments, our cloud migrations. All of that is done in our consulting forces. Cloud services is code word for our data center. We've been running a data center in our Hunt Valley headquarters since 1995, so we took our cloud blinders off decades ago. Today, much of our work is being done at AWS and Azure. Service and support can be done 2 different directions. One is proactively, that's our managed services group, and the other is reactively. And people still call us for ad hoc support. It's a much lesser portion of our business than it used to be. Much of our work is being done in a proactive managed sense. And if we maintain efficiently enough, there may be enough money left over in the budget to purchase new equipment and refresh it, just like all of you are doing right now for Windows 11. That's System Source today, and on behalf of the 70 of us, I welcome you to today's presentation. If you haven't enjoyed our computer museum, we have a substantial computer museum in our Hunt Valley headquarters with over 1,000 pieces on display. We do have tours all the time, and I think you'd enjoy it if you're into the old stuff. Our management series is a long series. We have about 15 presentations that we rotate. Today is a new one, but you might enjoy things like maximizing cyber insurance coverage while minimizing premiums, questions I'd ask when choosing a managed service provider. There's all kinds of fun ones in there. Don't hesitate to keep an eye on the front of our webpage or your email screen. The upcoming webinars that are in prep right now are 4 of them. Deciding between Azure Cloud on-premise hybrid is a popular topic. Microsoft licensing updates, I'm doing that myself. You're welcome to join us November 4th. Best practices for high-performing Wi-Fi networks has always been a hot topic for our webinars, courtesy of Alex Wilson, who's an ex-System Source alumni and Wi-Fi expert. And I'll be doing this one myself also. That's urgent IT security lessons for finance and insurance firms. And that's from Verizon's analysis of 3,300 security incidents in the finance and insurance sector. The agenda today is very simple: 12 cybersecurity myths putting organizations at risk. Let's head right into the meat of the presentation. Myth number 1. My organization's security needs are hard to pin down. Well, it could be a myth. Let's test it. One is the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. Verizon calls it their DBAR report. Comes out once a year and is intended for those organizations that seek research-driven direction to optimize security. If you're following regulatory standards only, or the board of directors or your accounting firm or whatever, if you're following solely that standard, the Verizon report doesn't really help you. So for those that have security agenda that at least includes number 2, where you're maximizing security at lowest cost, where you're making sure that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, and preventing my pet peeve, which is useless spending. If that's in your repertoire, if that's what you're looking for, the Verizon report does help us pin down needs. So let's talk a little bit more about the Verizon report. It is actually the subject of a different webinar, so you'll see only 4 or 5 slides on it here from a 117-page report. But Verizon has a database for which about 100 organizations contribute, everywhere from Akamai through Secret Service to Zscaler. In that database, they list incidents and data breaches. Those are the 2 keywords in red, totaling about 12,000. The data breaches are 12,000 out of the 22,000 incidents. And these are categorized and looked very closely at, and there are at least 9 industries that Verizon focuses on. What this means is that we can determine what goes wrong in your sector, not in general, not North America, not all small businesses, but in your sector. That's very helpful. It's in its 18th year, so you can actually get some trending, and of course it is worldwide, 139 countries. We'll take a very fast look at the Verizon report, just 1 or 2 slides coming up, but it is the subject of another webinar, and of course you can always pick up the 117 pages on the web, or you can put it on your evaluation. We'll get you the link. So one of the most important things about pinning down your needs is probably who we're fighting against. If we don't know who the enemy is, you really can't pin down your needs, and that's why I put this slide in. This particular slide comes from this year's Verizon report, indicates that the top actor by that we're fighting against in terms of security is solely one, and that's organized crime. Now, organized crime is not the mafia. Organized crime is a hacker with a plan. That's Verizon's definition of organized crime. It varies a little bit from 80% to 95%, whether you're a small or large business. But either case, it's the dominant actor in security breaches. Now, the important thing, and that's why I put this slide in here, is that not only do we understand who the enemy is, but we know what it takes to overcome this enemy, and that is our plan has to be better than the hacker's plan. It doesn't have to be perfect. We got to make sure we're not a soft target. So that's really a theme of today's presentation, is making sure that you're not a soft target. Now, I promised you a look at sector results. So each sector, there's 9 or more sectors in the Verizon report. There's sort of a big picture thought, and there's ones that are broken out a little bit. So, but it's at least 9 sectors. I picked professional services. This includes law firms, engineering firms, and consulting firms, and so on, accounting firms. I just picked it at random. I have a deck for almost all the sectors: healthcare, education, public sector. Now, so the key here is that 3 breach categories constitute 91% of the breaches. 3 categories. So if we can get good at each of these 3 categories, we would prevent 91% of breaches. Now, that sentence is not easy, because if we get good at these 3 areas, well, that's nothing easy about that. So let's just take a quick look at these areas. System intrusion are the complex attacks. These are the multi-step attacks, many times including persistence. The hackers love persistence. Generally ending up in ransomware at a 75% level. Number 2, social engineering. This, is all the phishing and pretexting that goes on, where threat actors are manipulating us and our staffs and then victimizing us. Many of you have implemented phishing campaigns at various levels of effectiveness. That's generally represented here in number 2. By the way, these are in rank order. Number 3, basic web app attacks. These are generally using stolen credentials, not ones from immediate phishing campaigns. Generally stolen credentials or credentials that people have reused elsewhere, or in any case, passwords that are not well protected. There's also some vulnerabilities here too. These are unpatched web applications. So those are the top 3. It's not easy to be creative with these top 3, but at least we can focus on them and know that the other 16 or 20 categories are not as important in this particular sector. So while we think that it's hard to predict, it's random, turns out that's not true, that we can predict the path of some of the hackers, at least at a 91% level in this sector. That's myth number 1, exposed. Myth number 2, required security expenses are unpredictable. Now, if you're on the financial side of this, or that you're involved in budgeting each year, this is a concern, because in many organizations, if you don't budget this year, it's not going to get spent next year. It turns out that if you're a managed service customer, much of the security risk is mitigated, and I'll show you that in a moment, at a fixed price. And when we entered the managed services business, where we're operating IT environments remotely, or portions of IT environments remotely, sometimes it's server only, sometimes it's workstation only, sometimes managing just 365 portal with its thousands of configurations. When we entered that business, we had no idea how important this budgeting fixed price was to CFOs and people in financial circles. But it's turned out we understand it now. You pay only for systems in use, and you do have an out-of-scope allowance in our managed services that eliminates a lot of the spikes and the unpredictable budget interruptions where you have certain overages and so on. That's really just not part of our managed services because we have an out-of-scope allowance. So if you're worried about the predictability of the security expenditures, think about managed services, because one of the legs of managed services, one of the 3 legs, is fixed price for easy budgeting. Now, one day I wrote down different security solutions, which you can see in front of you. We call this our security risk comfort level chart. We help our customers try to figure out which one of these solutions is right for their organization. Every organization has a different security risk comfort level. It's kind of interesting. If you walk into your nearest Fidelity office or Vanguard or Schwab or whoever you invest with, the people, I particularly invest in Fidelity. They have an office in Towson. I go there every 3 years to say hello, and they are very nice people, very well trained, very professional, and they're also working at half speed because Fidelity has dialed in IT security risk at a maximum level, same level you would do if you were managing $7 trillion of other people's money. So that's one extreme. I think you probably know the other extreme where it's not pretty and security risks are everywhere. So the question is where to dial in your organization's risk comfort level. The reason I put it up here is to talk about the risk comfort level and also to prove to myself that managed services is actually having an impact on many, if not all, of these risks that you see in front of you. In fact, the yellow ones are in scope for managed services, assuming you have the right level of Microsoft licensing, business premium or better, which most of you have. And some of them, of course, aren't even important to the budgets; they're just free. So most of these risk comfort level thoughts are actually covered by managed services, which means it's at a fixed price per month. So if stable budgeting is a priority in your organization, think about managed services because that's what it provides, at least in these yellow areas, which you can see is the majority of the chart. That's myth number 2. Myth number 3 is security is expensive. Well, of course, some of this could be true, but let's take a look under the hood and see more about it. I'm showing you the same chart you saw a moment ago, this risk comfort level chart, but I'm highlighting in green those that are less than $1 user per month. Look how many there are. So while we tell ourselves security is expensive, Well, the truth might be otherwise. Look at all the pieces that are under $1 user per month. So I'd invite you to look at this chart. We'll provide you the deck later on this afternoon, and seeing what's missing, especially for those of you in a budget crunch. We respect customer budgets for sure. Number 4, security opposes user satisfaction and productivity. This is a common myth, an important question among top management. Top management appropriately ask the question, what is this expenditure or what is this security improvement going to do to user satisfaction? And the same thing for productivity. They're suspicious that they're going to have productivity problems. Well, it turns out our data does not support that myth. In fact, it may refute it. Here it comes. So one day at System Source, we sat around the big conference table here when we still used big conference tables. And we created a metric to figure out whether we're having any impact on our clients' productivity. How do we know? How do we know when to go home at the end of the day, whether we've had any impact at all? So we created a metric called tickets per workstation per business day. And that's what you see in front of you. So you can see that the tickets per workstation per business day has been dropping. And this is against a base period of January 2016. In fact, it's down over a third. That's 37% drop in tickets per workstation per business day over the 114-month period. And of course, in this period, all of you probably try to forget, but do remember that there was work from home, there was return from work from home, Windows 11 upgrades. We've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at IT. All of you have lived that. This, by the way, includes all the tickets and support requests for our proactive activities. This is not just reactive work. So if we decide that your account is not well enough patched, we'll put in a ticket ourselves, or if there's an overheat condition on your servers, or if there's a CPU overage or whatever it is. So this includes all those tickets. Those proactive activities, of course, we can't prove what I'm about to say, but those proactive activities are probably the ones bringing this line down. And our job is to keep it down, even though the industry throws us every wrench on the way. So so what you can really see is that even though the security is infinitely tighter than it was in January 2016, in fact, we used to have security webinars and seminars just like this one in that time frame, 16, 15, 14, 2012, 13, and no one would attend. No one cared at all. I remember those days. So with all the security tightening done since then, and the impact on end users appears to be still positive according to this number, because we think that if you're spending less time putting in tickets, you're probably spending less time in IT, and therefore generating time to put in other areas of the business outside IT. Now, if this number was going up, of course, the conclusion would be the opposite. If your tickets per workstation per business day is going up, that means your end users are being impacted more and more by IT needs, but it's going the other direction. So that's where we are here. By the way, you can actually figure out what this is worth to top management. Reducing 37% of tickets saves about $10K a year in raw salary per 100 staff members. That assumes $30 per person per hour, assumes 1 hour of downtime per request, no other assumptions, not a funny money kind of number. 10K per 100 staff members just in hard salary savings by dropping 37% of your tickets. So that's one graph, one piece of data, and you may have the same data for your own organization. I'd be happy to benchmark with you if you do. The other is, so we've talked about productivity, let's talk about satisfaction. So you would think that all this higher security produces some level of dissatisfaction, but our data doesn't support that. That appears to be a myth. This is our customer sat data from our survey, our one question survey that takes 5 seconds after every support request has been completed. This is based on around 3,000 responses a year. And you can see this number has not dropped. In fact, it's increased a little bit. If you're up late at night and can't sleep, you're always welcome to go to our webpage at syssource.com. At the front of the webpage is the data in real time, unedited. On the front of our webpage, we also have it here in the lobby. This is just a snapshot of the word cloud that comes from the web page. Looks like it was taken at Christmas. I see the word Christmas right there. Myth number 5, security risk is an IT problem. Well, it turns out that's not really true. We're seeing a tremendous uplift in security questions coming from investors, coming from prospective customers, mergers and acquisitions, donors if you're in the nonprofit world. All of these folks are asking way more security questions than they did 5 years ago. So I would ask you to think about that and to prepare yourself for it. Have a piece of paper for new investors, for M&A, for donors, whatever area of the industry you're in. Because once a sales prospect asks for your posture on this, that, and the other MFA or whatever, you've got to be ready for that. If you're going to spend 3 or 4 or 5 days responding to it, that's probably not going to work for your sales force. Or if you've got to make certain investments, of course, that wouldn't work at all. But those are important to be prepared for, and we're seeing those requests come in using tickets. That actually drives up the number you saw in the tickets per workstation per business day, all those requests from customers for this type of work. So not really an IT only issue. It is spread across the organization. Number 6, all security tasks are exclusively either insourced or outsourced. They're assigned one direction or another. It turns out that's not really what the experts say. Gartner, which you know is the grandfather of research in the IT industry, has their run, grow, and transform model. This model suggests, and Gartner suggests, that not all security tasks, not all IT security tasks are created equal. That we should plot them on this graph. This graph has 2 axes. One is how much competitive advantage does that security change offer your organization? And in the vertical axis, how much business knowledge, how intimate with your business do I have to be, your organization, to install that IT security change, configuration, firewall, whatever. So on this graph, let's try a few as an example. If you're putting in, if you're doing your backups or you're doing your Office 365 portal management to tune up your security, if you're examining your enterprise apps, which is a troublesome area, if you're examining in the 365 portal your guest accounts, which is a troublesome area, that's down here. Doing that work gives you fairly small amounts of competitive advantage, and I don't have to be intimate with your business or your organization to do that work. Now let's think about a security dashboard or putting in a SIM system or building your own SIM. SIM, you know, is a security information and event manager that runs 7x24. Let's say you are building your own security operations center, you're building your own SOC. That would be up here. That can give you tremendous competitive advantage if done properly, requires a lot of knowledge of your environment. So do you see where different security tasks are in different quadrants on this run, grow, and transform model? So Gartner says spend the time necessary to put the tasks on this graph based on their competitive advantage they give your organization and how intimate a party has to be with your organization to execute this task. And then overlay the run, grow, and transform model. So Gartner says tasks like this one, which one example is optimizing your 365 portal for security, they're called run activities. Gartner calls those run activities. What Gartner says is you outsource run activities. Up here, like the security operations center that we just talked about, the SOC, or the SIM that goes behind it, Gartner says those are transform activities. You own those yourself. Those activities you execute internally. So you can see where no one size fits all, and that Gartner invites you to plot your different IT tasks, outsourcing some, owning some, and of course partnering with the ones in the middle. These are the grow area. This is a really interesting model to managers, I found, because I presented it a number of times. There's also some other interesting things about this model that have less to do with security, but more to do with the pressures you feel every day in your careers and your jobs. You can see just based on the size of the circles that the run activities are the largest share. It turns out it's about 65% of the expenditures are tied up in run activities, including salaries. The only unfortunate part of that really two unfortunate parts. One is that management's on the phone all day long, emailing you all day long. How's that security operations center? How's that SIM doing? Whatever it is in the upper right-hand corner, how's that security dashboard running? So they're interested in the transform activities while all the money is tied up and the people are tied up in the run activities. That's part of what makes our job so difficult, that dichotomy. The second thing that's interesting about this chart has not much to do with security, is the run activity, that 65% of the expenses, doesn't seem to decline over time. That's unfortunate. You would think we get more efficient at those activities. Turns out the data doesn't support that. That's myth number 6. So outsource run so that you can grow and transform is Gartner's conclusion. Number 7, social engineering risk reduction is difficult. Look, we have a lot of employees. Each one of them have weaknesses, and sometimes they get tired, and they're working from home, and some of them working from overseas, and some of them are contractors, and some of them seem out of control from an IT security point of view. Turns out the data doesn't support that. So here's data that is real data. This is our know-before data from a single client. We don't believe in any of our manufacturers' data, so we generate our own data sets. This is the phish-prone percentage. This is the percentage of folks that are willing to click a phishing email in a test situation. And everyone knows that all of you, probably many of you, already have phishing campaigns running at various frequencies, at various levels, various efficiencies. We can talk about that in a moment. And most of you started right where this data set started, 20%, 21%, 22%. That's pretty typical of phish-prone percentages. But look what happens when you turn on the training for those that are failing phishing tests. The problem goes into the noise and stays there. First of all, can you imagine for $2.50 or whatever per month, can you imagine fixing business problems for that level at this speed for that small amount of money? It's almost a miracle. Now, there's a couple things here, and there's a bit of that myth that we talked about a moment ago. Social engineering risk reduction is difficult. A bit of that appears to be true, because once you get below 1.5%, that's sitting right here or so, it turns out that Verizon says, we're disappointed, but there appears to be a barrier at that point, a baseline, a boundary that you can't seem to get below on average. That there's 1.5% of the workforce in the world who are willing to click on that email and are willing to be fooled by it. And that's unfortunate. So that piece of the myth may be true at a 1.5% level. But for you to get down into the 2s and 3s or whatever the average is for your industries, KnowBe4 actually tells you the average for your industries so you can compare your own work. What's somewhat interesting and may lead to you thinking that this myth is real is that most clients don't set up their phishing campaigns properly. So my staff and I can actually see from 20 feet away with my glasses whether a client has set their phishing policy and configuration properly. Those that don't, those that phish only once a quarter, maybe once a month, maybe not using AI phishing templates, chosen phishing templates like KnowBe4 offers, for any number of reasons, or their managers don't follow up on their training campaigns. For people who don't take training campaigns, there's no follow-up. There's lots of ways to mess this up. But if you have all the configurations in the proper mode, this type of performance that you see in front of you is absolutely possible. Of course, it's real. This is real data. This, by the way, right here is 18 weeks at 0. And at the end of this curve, it's also 3 weeks at 0. So there are periods of time, long periods of time, that you can get a phish-prone percentage of 0. But Verizon says, you know, after all the work that we've done and all the phishing campaigns that have been run throughout the world, we're seeing a 1.5% that are going to be fooled no matter what day it is. And of course, anytime you have new hires, you know you're going to get a blip in your phishing templates, phishing percentage. So there's some truism in that myth at a 1.5% level, but for those of you who have not taken phishing down into the noise, phish-prone percentages down into the noise, there is hope. And we actually have a service that we reset up people's KnowBe4. For a fairly small amount of money, we reset it up so that you can get these kinds of results and blow away that myth. Ready for number 8? Security is difficult to measure and communicate. That seems, in a weak moment, I might even agree with that. But here's what we've done to blow that myth. One is to install performance reporting. Make sure that in the critical areas, you've got lights or dashboards or something, reports that enable you to figure out where you are. This is a very basic area known as patch score. When I talk to clients, and I don't want anyone on this call to feel bad, when I talk to clients, they don't know their patch scores. And we have sort of verified that because we measure incoming clients' patch scores before they start managed services. We rarely see scores above 35, rarely to never. But we can increase those scores to 94% with attention. It only takes a couple weeks. Now, patching is very boring. It's a lost art, and there's reasons why people come to us with small scores. But that leaves us as a soft target. And remember, we talked about that earlier. You don't want to be a soft target. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be 100. We go to 100 from time to time. But it's just got to make sure that you're not a soft target so the hacker moves on to the next organization. So we know this is lost art because we measure customers inbound. We've done that for many years, and the scores are very, very low. So make sure you have a patch score. This particular score right here in front of you is the Microsoft patch score. The other piece, looking at a little bit bigger picture, is the security quick glance dashboard. So our managed clients, each of them has a dashboard like you see in front of you with lights on it. These lights tell us where we are on the different security attributes. Now, what you're seeing here is a little tiny piece of a 66-line long spreadsheet. And there's a board version of this in order to report to top management. I've done board presentations of this personally. You can see how important 2FA is. I think you know that already. There's like 5 lines here in 2FA all by itself. So our clients can see themselves going from red to yellow to green over time. We have no clients that are completely green on this particular dashboard, but we do have another infrastructure dashboard where we do have clients that are all green. But these are the investments, and at least you understand. One of the things I'm very concerned about is that clients who don't understand their risk that they're assuming. If you don't understand the risk you're assuming, of course, you can't buy the right insurance, you can't make the right budget decisions for security, and so that customers are assuming a certain level of risk, and I think more customers need to know what that risk is. The dashboard is built just for that purpose. Moving on to myth 9, cyber insurance is a one-time per year effort. That probably used to be true. And I think in many organizations, people still think about it that way. When I ask in the middle of the year, do you have cyber insurance? What are the limits? Many people, there's a look that says, I'm not sure. I went through it 6 months ago, I can't remember. Well, cyber insurance is no longer a one-time per year effort. Now, all of us recognize the attestation forms. This is just one from Travelers or somebody I copied off the screen. Perhaps it was the one that they gave to us for our cyber insurance, which we just renewed in September. And so we sign this, we do the best we can, we do it truthfully, all of us do that. Let's move on. The reason I bring this up is that the insurance companies have gone to limit claims, and they tell you this up front. There's nothing secretive about this. They tell you up front, they're going to reduce your claim by 50% at 45 days and 75% at 90 days if you have not patched. So you take more of the risk as time goes on if you haven't patched. They give you what's called a 45-day grace period. That's a nice way of saying they give you the full claim if you've patched within 45 days, but then what they call risk sharing. Only insurance companies can make up these words. Risk sharing between the policyholder and insurer incrementally shifts to the policyholder, who takes on more of the risk if the vulnerability is not patched at 46, 90, 180, and 365-day points. And these are substantial numbers. You know, if your claim is at $3 million, we've seen claims at $3 million among our non-managed clients, that's easy. You know, that's a big claim reduction at 45 days. So for this reason, we've got to pay attention to our cybersecurity commitments all year long, including callback verification. All of us know that if you get we had one here yesterday. If you get a request for something or a file attachment from some unknown person, you've got to call and make sure you know who that person is before you open up that file or respond to whatever it is. It turns out that 4 or 5 insurers that I've surveyed have callback verification requirements of some type. Sometimes they require you to have a callback verification policy in order to write the insurance, and other times they want to see that policy before they pay the claim. If you don't have that policy, by the way, our insurance company has engaged one of the major law firms to write it, and we do have a copy that you're welcome to have. Just put it on your evaluation. We can send you that policy if you don't have it. So in various ways, we've got to make sure that our commitment to the cyber insurance folks are not one time a year, that there's no configuration drift where we're getting away from our commitments. We've got to make sure that we're verifying them all throughout the year. That's myth number 9. Myth number 10, it's hard to make progress in IT security. Well, you know, on a weak moment, I might agree with that, but let's take a look at the data and see what it says. So one of the things that we plot here internally, this is our internal data, is fraudulent logins to 365 accounts. All of you have been involved in this. You call them business email compromises, BECs is what the industry calls it. We were seeing 10 a quarter at the end of 2021 among our thousands of licenses and staff that we manage. We've gotten that number down into the 1 or 2 range per quarter. Can't seem to get it to 0. That may go back to what Verizon was talking about, where 1.5% of people can be fooled anytime. We can't seem to get this to 0, although there were 8 months here at 0. So we had some inkling of hope, but at least the line's going the right direction. These are our managed customers, is what you're looking at right here. Unfortunately, we had one yesterday, you know, another one that doing the wrong thing, gave up their credentials, whatever the story is. I like the ones that wait 2 weeks before they tell us. But our job is to make sure these situations are repaired and that fraud does not occur. So I spent an hour on that myself yesterday with one of our clients. So it appears that data says that the war could be sort of won, barring the 1.5% factor that Verizon figured out. So this is our fraudulent logins. And we're also seeing the same kind of pattern in the ransomware area. Most likely, I mean, not likely, but you can see the data. First of all, the median ransomware loss was 150K prior to last year. It dropped to 115. That's the first good sign. That's the first time we've seen that drop. Now the question is why? Why did the average ransomware loss drop? And the answer is less and less people are paying the ransom. So in 2022, Verizon said half were not paid. In 23, 54% were not paid. In 2024, 64% were not paid. So of course, with less people paying ransom, the ransom folks have to give you a discount. So that's what caused the 150 going down to 115 is basic economics between supply and demand. So it looks like we're making some progress. And that might blow myth number 8 or whatever number we're on. The third one, a third graph that supports this is the BEC graph. That's the business email compromise that we just talked about. The business email compromise has plateaued. 2024 data did not get applied here. I don't know why Verizon didn't put it in there, but they did mention it had not moved. So at least it's not getting any worse. Now, $50,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money. It's a company van in an organization that you belong to. The only problem with this is that most of the policies, nearly all the cyber insurance policies, have separate lower sublimits for social engineering claims. Those sublimits are generally $250,000, which means if you get, or generally $100,000 actually, we have $250 here internally. So if you don't ask for more, if you don't demand more, if you're not a large organization, you probably have a sublimit of 100 grand. That means when you have 2 of these losses in a year, you're uninsured. So think about that relative to the risk involved. That's why phishing campaigns are so important. Now, there is some good news and some progress that shows that that this myth is busted, that it's difficult to make progress in IT security. We're actually seeing and I'll explain what this is in a moment, we're actually seeing some progress in this graph. So in this graph, you're seeing all vulnerabilities. You're seeing the known exploited vulnerabilities. Those are the ones that are under exploitation. Those are the bad ones. And these are edge only. These are firewall and edge only, NetScalers, and so on. And what you're seeing is the remediation is higher for the edge devices. So you are seeing some progress in moving toward what we should be doing, and that's protecting the edge of our environments. So you're seeing some people using the data, using the urgency, and producing better results. That's myth number 10. Myth number 11, AI is driving security risks. There are actually some thought behind this myth. Let's break it down. What we're seeing here in front of you is a Verizon data point. And Verizon says a closer to home emerging threat from AI is loss of data, the potential for corporate sensitive data to leak into the models themselves. So Verizon goes and breaks it down. 15% of employees are routinely accessing Gen AI systems on their corporate devices. That's neither here nor there. And this note 15 is way up. This is using data from ending in October or January of this year, something like that, January of this year. So the 15% number is up, but that doesn't make any difference. More and more employees are using Gen AI systems that are accessing it on their corporate devices at least once every 15 days, so they're active users. However, a large number of the 15% are using a non-corporate email as the identifier on their account. About 3/4, 72% of the 15 are using a non-corporate email. Those of you who are in AI circles know that if you're not using a corporate email, that data is probably leaking into the model. So this is the real AI security risk that Verizon has identified. It's not AI-assisted malicious emails that all of us think and is a bit of a myth. Here goes the myth. So you would think that AI is helping hackers produce better, more malicious emails over time. Well, AI became popular here at the end of 2022. That's the green vertical bar. And the percentage of AI-assisted malicious emails over time is rising. In fact, it's almost doubling. So that's not a myth. However, the line is not increasing in slope, meaning that AI doesn't seem to impact this. Because if AI impacted it, the line would be like the purple line in front of you. It would be accelerating, but it's not. It's forming a single line that you can see here in orange. It's not accelerating like you see here in purple. So that tells us, and told Verizon, that AI may not be assisting the hackers with these malicious emails. Now, that may or may not be good news. Some of the hackers were speaking better English, writing better English, using other techniques to produce better emails. So AI is not the only way these folks have to trick us. So the myth that AI is driving malicious emails does not appear to be true, but we've got to be very careful and making sure our staffs are following our policies and make sure our data is not leaking over into the model. So that myth might be half true. Moving on to myth 12, the last one, my antivirus, or name whatever layer you want, is enough to reduce risks. Turns out that's not really true. We do hear this from time to time. I'll put EDR in, or I'll have a strong whatever system. No single layer is enough these days. And here's the proof of that. So this is a Verizon graph from the latest data, or perhaps a year before, that shows what are the steps in system intrusion breaches. The first step is here. The second step, which is breach escalation, is here. The third step, which is the result, which hopefully will never happen to any of us, is on the right-hand side. So what you can see in front of you is, look how many layers are needed to stop the hacker from creating the bad result. You've got to be good at hacking against servers, that's how you read this, unknown against servers, malware against servers. So if they get through the first layer, initial access, then you've got to be good at these things in order to prevent the breach escalation. And then you got to be good at these things in order to prevent the result. Do you see? And some of them are in the noise, so you can cross those out, that's fine. But you still have plenty of work to do in these areas right here. That's why layers are so important to security. So if any of you are not confident that layers are important, this is the graph behind it. So we talked about this is malware against servers, hacking against servers. IA means, I used to memorize this. IA is what Verizon calls integrity. That's where it's basically ransomware, where the data has been changed from the original. CP means confidentiality against server. That's generally a data loss situation. And AU means availability. That could be a ransomware situation also. Do you see how different these different steps are? So no one or even no two layers is going to prevent the result based on this data. Those are the 12 myths for today. I'm going to head into a Learning Center offer. Learning Center does a lot of training, our Learning Center, and I've asked Michelle to create a discount table for our training for those that have joined us here today. You just mentioned today's seminar and register by 11:15, and Michelle and team have a discount for you on security courses in our Learning Center. Now it's time to ask questions, ask about IT, and we appreciate your feedback in our survey after today's session. And we appreciate you coming very much. Why don't you go ahead and put questions in the question box. And while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and look over the questions that you typed in when you first registered. I'll be using first names only just to protect the innocent, starting with Suna. Suna, you asked about real risk versus myths. How do these myths increase vulnerabilities to cyber attacks or data breaches? So I would say to you that pursuing these myths unfocuses us. If you're chasing myths that are not really true or not 100% true, it unfocuses us. And that's very difficult. I find that even major IT departments can't work, more than 3, 4, 5 things at a time, even if you have a big staff. And it also causes spending in less effective areas. So often we're spending money in less effective areas and neglecting the ones that we need to be more effective in. So that's some of the reasons why the myths need to be blown, because it unfocuses us and causes us to spend in the wrong areas. Hopefully I've answered your question soon. Don't hesitate to put your comments in, and any experience you have that might refute the refuting of the myths or any other myths you want to add, don't hesitate to just put it in the question box and we'll talk about it. Your experience is very, very helpful to all of us. Stephen, thanks for joining us today. You had the most interesting question of the crowd. Are there any cybersecurity myths that were previously considered facts? That's a really interesting question. And I would suggest to you that probably all the myths used to be fact until the data proved them otherwise. So the facts used to be myths, or some evolution happened. For example, cyber insurance used to be a one-time per year effort. That myth used to be a fact. But the data for insurance that only insurance companies have, of course, says that that's not acceptable to them. They want you to monitor insurance, the insurance requirements, all the patching and so on, all year long based on the data. Of course, that brings down their claims. So you can see evolution over time, and as the data was accumulated, that fact became a myth, where you could get by watching cyber insurance only one time per year. Stephen, thanks for that question. It was a great one. Justin, you asked about vulnerabilities of the common user, how to actively prevent risks on back-end / informing users. Not exactly sure what you're getting at, and don't hesitate to clarify in the question box. But I did mention that, at least in the know before area, even at 20 feet away, we can see in the portal whether you've configured it properly, because only the proper configuration of know before, and I assume this is true of really any software, produces the result. It's kind of interesting, phishing and probably true of accounting software too. If you don't configure it properly, it's actually kind of worthless. I've never really encountered software that, if you haven't configured it just right, it doesn't do much for you. Kind of interesting. Some questions in the box. Nick, welcome today. Is there a ranking anywhere based on the tools deployed and breaches? For example, by CrowdStrike, Rapid7, Proofpoint, etc. Is there a ranking anywhere based on the tools deployed? Ranking meaning what breaches have been prevented, I think is what you're saying, or what breaches have been identified or incidents have been identified. The answer is not by vendor. I've never seen a chart that says CrowdStrike got this percentage, Rapid7 got that percentage, Proofpoint got that one. I've never seen anything like that. That data, is probably proprietary and probably really hard to get. It is not one that Verizon traces and tracks based on the actual tool deployed. Now, the type of tool deployed is absolutely covered in the Verizon report. Because remember, these three categories have different tools. I'm rolling through the slide deck. Here it comes. And here, for professional services, for example, the tools necessary to support these, support better security performance in these three areas are absolutely proven. So if you don't have a KnowBe4 or something like it, you'll have very difficult time making inroads on social engineering. Number two, so by all means, the tools are tied to these breach categories. And now you know, at least for professional services, which breach categories to focus on. But the actual tool name, the brand name, is not something that sits in the Verizon report. Thanks for that question. Stephen, you said, how to filter out false positives from the data. I'm not sure which data you're referring to. I'm very sensitive to false positives because that's a huge workload issue. We fine tune this all the time for our managed customers, so it's an endless effort. But you'll have to tell me what data you're thinking about, whether it's phishing data or whether it's ransomware data. We're not seeing false positives being onerous. They're absolutely there. But the proper tuning of the tools, whether it be CrowdStrike or our Semantic is our standard in our managed operations, is important. I'm not negating the thought of false positives. When you operate a SIM, as we don't operate the SIM, we resell Arctic Wolf SIM to some of our heavily regulated clients. There's always going to be false positives. They're ingesting tremendous amounts of information across their environment into the SIM. But I would say it is not onerous. So it's not something to fear is what I'm trying to say. But further tuning is always worthwhile. Thanks, Stephen, for the question. Nick, you've replied that identified when using those tools. Nick, you've noted that's what I thought. I was just curious. Thanks. That was my next question. I'll check that out. Okay. Got it. I'll take other questions from you or other experience that you have want to share with us. If there's no more questions, I will return 7 minutes until 1 o'clock to you, and we appreciate your time very, very much. Hopefully today was beneficial to you. Thanks for joining us.